Good morning, or rather good afternoon, viewers. This session will be a curtain raiser to the FHS. What we are going to do here is basically give you some idea of what we are intending to study in this course. This will be taken up by our by our general editor of the course, Professor Pandab Nayak, who will be giving you some kind of an idea as to how to study human society and questions related to that. Now, what I'll do is basically I'll just introduce the course to you, and I'll just tell you the outline and so on, because this course FHS has been recently been revised. And what we need to do is basically to take a look at the outlines of this revised course, and then we'll tell you about. You can ask questions about why this revision was taken and why we took up certain topics and why we did not take up certain topics. At the outset, let me tell you what we did. Basically, we cut down the number of blocks in the course from 8 to 7, basically to make the thing easier, because our feedbacks were telling us, look, the course was getting to be too heavy, and consequently we divided the themes into about 7 blocks. We took up the concerns which were to be which had become contemporary in this period, that is the period between when the first FHS was launched and the revision took place. Because in the first FHS course, if you would remember, or if you take care to take a look at its outline, you will see questions like the South Africa, contemporary questions were like apartheid in South Africa and so on. But in these past 15 years and so, the world has moved on. Apartheid ended in South Africa in '94, and basically the demise of Soviet Union, the collapse of communist states in Eastern Europe, all that has changed the world scenario quite a lot. And with the growth of globalization which has occurred in this past 15 years, what we see is a society, a much more interlinked society. And we needed to address our concerns and questions towards this interlinked society. What is its background, and what can we learn from the nature of societies which have emerged here? So we have units concerning that in our course as well. The block 1 of the course basically is titled Human Society and Its Evolution. It has 4 units. This unit 1 is about studying human society, in which we tell you about the way we are, hows and whys of studying human society. Then there's a unit on evolution of humankind, which basically gives you a historical background of human development from basically the Stone Age man to the to later periods. Then we talk about the emergence of modern world, how industrial societies arose and so on and so forth. Then we have importantly a unit on post-industrial society, which delineates to you the nature of advanced industrial societies which have come up in the period from 1950s onwards to the current day. What is the nature of this post-industrial society? We have discussed in this unit. Then we have in block 2 we have emergence of modern India as our focus, because we feel some kind of an understanding of the locale of nationalism. That is what is important for our student to understand. When we study the period of the 20th century and beyond, we need to focus on the locale of nationalism. What was nationalism? How did it impact our society and our lives? And what were the challenges which its legacy left in the post-independent period? These are some of the themes which we have taken up in subsequent in the units in this block on emergence of modern India. Then we have block 3 as the which is titled the social system. Here unit 9 is on social structure. It tells you about what is the social structure of a society. Then unit 10 talks about the social institutions in society. Unit 11 is about the marginalized groups which exist in our society. Unit 12 talks of social change and transformation, a part of which was was the discussion which preceded this particular teleconferencing, where Dr. Washum talked to you about the nature of social change and transformation. Block 4, political and administrative systems, gives you an idea of the kind of administrative, constitutional kind of a background or background of the society we are living in. Here Unit 13 focuses on the Indian Constitution, Unit 14 constitutions on the, focuses on democratic processes, Unit 15 focuses on administrative structures and processes, Unit 16 is on governance issues and strategies. Then we go on to the Block 5, where we detail to you the nature of economic development which has taken place in the post-independent period. And here units are to do with, Unit 17 is to do with structure of Indian economy, Unit 18 is on planning in India, Unit 19 appraises the Indian economy, and then Unit 20 places you in the economic reforms in the globalization context, and the developments which have been a part of our growth process since 1991. Block 6, that is arts and aesthetics, basically is to sensitize you to the questions of arts and aesthetics which exist in us, which exist amidst us. I mean, the question, we take up literature, we take up fine arts, we take up dance and music, and then also we take up cinema and theatre. All these craft and art forms have a bearing on the social sensitivities which we have developed over the years. And these we need to focus on to understand how do we keep alive to our social concerns through developing our social sensitivities in an aesthetic fashion. Block 7 then takes you to the contemporary concerns and challenges. This block basically is more to the tune of the fact that we lived in a changed world context today, where we take up the question of human security, education and awareness, information communication technology and the globalized society, the questions of peace and conflict, then the question of environment, which is also assuming a prominent kind of a place today. Now, here you see that by linking up national and global concerns, we have tried to produce some kind of an awareness for the student, where he will be able to see issues in a much wider context. I mean, he would not be limited to seeing, he or she would not be limited to seeing issues which are current in the prevalent in the present day India in isolation. He would be able to link up what is happening to the what is happening in Indian society or Indian situation to a globalized or a much more global context. Now, what I'll do now is Professor Nayak will talk about. I mean, he'll do the curtain raiser on this course. He will take up the question of studying human society, and he'll talk about for 10-15 minutes on that. And in between, if you after his presentation, if you have any questions, then you can come back to us from your study centers or wherever you are, and you are free to ask questions after he finishes his presentations. And then in the meantime, when you are not asking questions, we will be carrying on a discussion of the kind of issues which have been raised by Professor Nayak. So I hand over to Professor Nayak for the next 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Ajay. My task is to actually sort of introduce to you this revised course which we have edited lately, and these courses have not reached your hands so far. They will be in a couple of months' time. They will be ready and they will be dispersed to you. I'll just take one or 2 minutes about the preliminary part of the introduction of this foundation course. Why did we feel the need to have a foundation course first of all? You know, early on, I mean, that is early times, meaning 87, 88, that period, it was always felt that a student, whether belonging to the science stream or commerce stream or whatever stream a student may belong to, that student should have some basic understanding of that is why the word foundation, some basic understanding of the society as such. So that is where the distinction between a science student, an art student or a commerce student doesn't apply. And it was that end in view we have prepared two sets of foundation courses, one for science and social sciences and humanities, the other for the sciences. Now we are concerned with the one foundation course that is for the students of humanities and social sciences. That is number one. Number two, now when we thought about it, we over the years felt that such a course really needed major revisions. Of course, as we started plowing back the inputs we received from different students, one, it was very heavy at a foundation level. The student probably is not prepared to digest the contents, and one of the reasons the data gets outdated at times. For instance, as you were referring to Soviet Union no longer exists. So that type of stuff is there always. So many changes in the society demanded that along with the convenience of the students' learning, we should also revise the courses. The courses have undergone two revisions so far. One revision I myself have conducted for the international cell students, and and this is the third one that is in the process. So this is the basic purpose is each student should know something about his or her own society, and here the stream doesn't matter at all, whether you are a science student or a art student. Now coming to the topic proper, now how to study society has been always a very challenging topic. It is challenging basically because it gives rise to, it's a more of a polemical or controversial question, because what I say you may not agree, what you say I may not agree, but I have always thought that there is definitely there is some common ground of meeting all the divergent points of view, and that is where maybe we can reach the minimum common core. For instance, none of us will disagree that love is to be welcome, hate is to be hated. So there are certain settled things available. But then the question arises when it comes to policy making, when it's a matter of state, when it's a matter of governance, certain things do give rise to difference of opinion, and more so because one group would be always lobbying for votes in a democratic setup like ours, and therefore they would be promoting a particular agenda which is not acceptable to another group. So that sort of thing is happening. So if one group is in rule, you expect this set of reforms are going to take place. If another set of political group is in the rule, you expect another set of reforms to take place. Now, to begin with the beginning as such, let's try to know what a society is. Now, everybody says that society is an aggregation of individuals. But again, this is not true. I'll take an analogy. For instance, I mean, this has been most clearly expressed in a political ideology called fascism. Actually the word fascio is an Italian word which says it's a bundle of sticks. Now, meaning of the term is, it is like this. Let us say, if you assemble together 10 sticks, the strength generated is not of 10 sticks only. Idea is that 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to 10 sticks will give you a strength which is more than 10. So it is always the case. Like we always say, two minds think better than one. Because when there are two, they don't think like two, but when they think much better than two persons sitting together and doing that job. There is a reference to generation of some inherent energy when so many forces come together. Now, this is the point to be noted. Now, when we all live together in a society, it is not as if the strength is equal to the number of individuals living in the society. The strength is much more than that. Now, where does that strength come from? That is a very important issue. Now, the strength comes from living together, what is called the composite living. Now, when you say composite living, you give rise to certain values, and those values become very important for everybody to emulate. Now, these values, let's say, living together is an important value. Tolerance of different groups tolerating each other. They will be always trying to establish certain minimum floor level of suffering each other. I'm deliberately using the word suffering because even if it becomes difficult to coexist with others, we have to suffer at that point because both the parties, both the groups have to live in the society. So that is the minimum or the floor level of toleration among the people, and people have to learn that value of tolerating the others. Similarly, we have a concept called freedom. I have freedom, you have freedom, but it doesn't mean that I should believe in enjoying my freedom at the expense of your freedom. It equally applies to you. You should not be also doing things. Justice Holmes, famous American judge, who has said, if having freedom doesn't mean you carry a torch of flame and run inside a cinema theater and shout that I have the freedom, I can do anything I like. You are not permitted to do those things. Therefore, all the constitutions of all the democratic countries have introduced something called reasonable restrictions on freedom. All those reasonable restrictions have come because society wants that your freedom should be moderated and regulated. Freedom is necessary for unfoldment of the personality. The personality grows best when in a liberal climate, in a free climate. But freedom needs to be also regulated for a society to survive and prosper. So equally, for instance, equality is another one. Now, when you have all these values emanate from, the point to be noted here is when we all live together and when we count each other as important, dignified individuals. Then the question arises for the government, of course, how to really prioritize them. Which one is first, which will come next, which will come thereafter. Now, here comes the real source of the differences that we normally come across in a modern governance system. For instance, if you cannot suffer each other, if you cannot coexist, if you do not have toleration, then we have seen communal riots all around. It is two different religious groups not really believing or not having the tolerance to suffer each other, for whatever reasons. And if we see that in our society lately communal riots are becoming more frequent, it only means that the level of toleration on the part of some groups have really gone low. Similarly, freedom and equality often come in contradiction with each other. You know, it is so much so that we have one of the most prevalent descriptions of democracy is called liberal democracy. Now, when you say liberal democracy, if you scratch the surface, you will find that the internal meaning of liberal democracy is nothing but a contradiction. But that contradiction between liberalism on the one hand and democracy on the other, we have to live with, because the society is growing only in that type of contradiction. Liberalism, as we know, focuses or emphasizes freedom. Democracy, as we know, demos means people, that is equality among the people. So how does freedom coexist with equality? Now, freedom and equality have to coexist if a society has to grow. Otherwise, it will be a jungle-like situation. Either you have freedom all through or you have equality all through. But if you have equality all through, which many of us prefer in a third world setup, for instance, mostly the reason is, I'm just off the cuff, I want to say that the basic reason is the structured inequalities are so much. Third world has been mostly a victim of this type of inequality, global inequality, and therefore in the third world equality is preferred more than freedom. The developed world, Western developed liberal democracies have given preference more to freedom, whereas the former colonial countries of the third world are focusing or emphasizing more on equality. But then the question would arise, I mean the question that in the nation building experiments rulers face, namely, can you distribute poverty? For instance, like they say that the benefits of growth are not being properly distributed among all sections of the people. Now, true, benefits of growth are not distributed among all sections of the people. But you shift the focus to only distribution of benefits, the question would arise, where will the benefits come from first? Benefits come only when there is growth. So, if you do not focus on growth, there will be no benefits and there will be nothing to distribute. Probably, as once upon a time Bhutto said, we will be left with poverty to distribute.
That's right.
So, the challenge before the rulers therefore is how to bring about growth and also how to really undertake the task of benefiting the fruits of growth as far as possible equally among all sections of the people. Now, this is a challenge which would much depend on so many factors. Primarily, the composition of the political people, because each political group has a set of belief of its own. Some would support freedom, some would support equality, some would support all types of things. So, the point that I am trying to make here is very importantly that the rulers are always under a challenge, namely how to bring about growth and at the same time how to bring about distributive justice, that is how the benefits of growth should be equally distributed. Now, all this take us to a very interesting plane of discussion. It is true that the rulers have challenges, but then the question would be, how would rulers identify problems? The problems, as I said, are major strands. One strand is equality, another strand is freedom. But there are so many phenomena, so many problems in the world, in the society, in our own society. How do we really perceive a problem? You see, how to study society would very centrally depend on how do we perceive our problems. Because we have a habit of perceiving problems as it suits us or as it directly affects us. For instance, the popular example is a thirsty man looking at a glass half full. Now, a half full glass, everybody knows, is also half empty. But a half full glass is half full to a thirsty man, because the thirsty man demands a full glass of water. So, it doesn't. But to the naked eye, it is also half empty. Now, this is the phenomenon. Though it is a mechanical scenario, in the society, these things have a different connotation altogether. It is not as neatly demarcated as you find in the physical world. Physical world you have half-half, but nothing like that occurs in a world of society. Society, you have to weigh what is called, consider what is essential and what is not so essential. So, you go by the essentials and leave out the non-essentials. But there are people also who go by the non-essentials, leave out the essentials. Because most of these people are responsible for leaving 2/3 of their people in poverty, in the traps of poverty, debt and all types of things. Otherwise, how do you explain in an independent state where people are sovereign, 2/3 of them are below the poverty line? So, it is because of some such difficulty is there. If you pursue the essentialist line, it would not be there. Now, the question therefore is, as I said, it is the perception problem. You know, a famous anthropologist, I will give an example, Edmund Leach, he once was responding to a question, why these anthropologists mostly take pleasure in describing the tribal dresses, the external bearings of the tribal ornaments, dresses, etc. He called these anthropologists. He said they were not interested in knowing the living system where the tribals may not be getting a good mouthful at the end of the day. But those things didn't, for instance, attract these anthropologists as much as their dress peculiarities did. Now, to them, he used to call them the butterfly catchers. Now, butterfly catchers is a very interesting word of Edmund Leach to suggest or to refer to those type of anthropologists who are not interested in focusing, what I was telling you, the essential aspects of the living. They were mostly concerned about the non-essential or external bearings of the tribals. Now, when anybody is studying society, you or I or anybody studying society, I would like that this demarcation, essential versus the non-essential, not so important. Not that they are not important at all, but given the scarcity of resources and given the urgency of the time required to solve a problem, our rulers are faced with these constraints. Now, if you are confronted with these type of problems, then the foremost compulsion on you is you must be able to choose, and your choice should be of the essentials. And when you choose essentials, obviously you overlook non-essentials. That overlooking is permitted. I think that overlooking is adjustable to the fact that you are giving more importance to the essentials. For instance, in a country like ours or anywhere else, I would suggest, if you ask me, my own opinion would be, I would give more importance to the fact that people should be lifted above the poverty line. Now, why should people 50, 60 years after, in a country where people are sovereign, where the regular democratic elections are taking place, why should these people who are choosing their own sovereign periodically, regularly, why should they be suffering and living with bare subsistence? Almost 1 billion of people living with $1 a day. I mean, that takes you to, if you are asked to analyze that phenomenon, obviously one has to see whether the priorities that the rulers have set for themselves are correct or not. That is more important. And if this is not there, and if this is not to be there also, if it is not there, we have seen the history, we have seen the results. There are people below the poverty line, their number is rising. The granaries are full of food grains, but the number of people below the poverty line are equally rising. Now, these are two contradictions. How do we resolve this? Why should our granaries be full and our people should be hungry and starving? Now, at one point of time, I was asked this question, which I would like to repeat here. Here the best solution is none other than our own father of nation who had given it, what is called talisman, Gandhiji's talisman. What he said is, whenever you are confronted with a dilemma like this, you have all the granaries of food, but you have also people dying of hunger or starvation, or people are below the poverty line for what? He said, the best solution is that you should take the next step in a manner which will ultimately wipe off the tears of the last man. Now, what could be the solution here? Is the solution you artificially hoard, you hold them as buffer stocks, you storage them for exports? Now, all these are good policy options in an economy, food grains economy. But the foremost question, the most essential question for me to study a society like this would be that people should not be either going to the bed without a morsel of food, or people should not be below the poverty line as they are in such huge numbers now, especially when the country has such a huge pile of food grains. And definitely this is one part of the story. The other part of the story is, if I can address to these essentials of living process, then obviously the other things that we witness in the country, I would definitely not go by these things. I will always consider, for instance, frequent communal riots taking place in this country I would consider myself to be all these are diversionary techniques adopted by the rulers to divert the attention of the people, because they cannot feed them properly, they don't have the policies correctly, and as a result of which we have the rulers do find this is called scapegoating. They would create such emotions that people will automatically be engaged or diverted towards that, forgetting that their main issue of how to live with dignity is not given importance due. Now, all these questions are important, but then at times you have very difficult questions you face. I mean, choosing the right one is important, though, and even if you don't choose the right one, the diversionary measures that we see are quite often, they are also should be viewed, should be analyzed accordingly. But there are some difficult questions nonetheless. Now, let me tell you, give you some, with the example of some difficult questions. Let's say, how do we, when we know that science and reason, importance of science, reason, etc. Is there. I, for instance, often cannot understand why people who subscribe to scientific beliefs also should subscribe to irrational beliefs, believe in superstitions. But we have this all around. This is not on decline. This is on the contrary, it is on the rise. Maybe thick layers of myths shroud us.
2 minutes.
Okay. So, then the question would arise, difficult questions would be, let's say, recently I'll just take an example from USA, for instance. The Secretary of State denied, the President has also denied that. The Secretary of State has denied that there was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq at the time of American invasion of Iraq. And secondly, that there has been no linkages between Saddam Hussein and 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers of New York. But despite these clear official denials which have been issued, we have an Harris poll which was conducted only earlier, 2 or 3 months before, which says that people in America believe, and that number is on the rise, that is, people who believe that weapons of mass destruction were there in Iraq for reasons of which America had attacked. Now that belief, number of believers in that particular thing which is officially denied is rising even now, from 35% in 2005 to 46% now. That means that it's very difficult. I mean, knowledge and propaganda. You see, when everything is denied, thereafter also these beliefs are growing, and among the Americans who are supposed to be educated people, means that we cannot call it knowledge. I mean, because we are dealing with studying society, this is a very important problem, that when you study society, we should learn how to distinguish knowledge from propaganda. Propaganda has not to come into the scope of knowledge. Okay, then you want to say something?
Yeah, no, it's now 12:35. We need to invite questions from the.
Okay, please do.
Okay, and because we had
then we'll have
20 minutes, and then we can carry on the discussion.
Sure.
So I invite questions from the students wherever they are at whichever study center. You are most welcome to ask questions on what has been presented so far, and we will answer all your questions and queries as they come in. Meanwhile, we'll continue our discussion on studying human society, a kind of a curtain raiser to this course, which we the foundation course in humanities and social sciences. Professor Naik, you would want to say something further, or shall we get into a question-answer mode?
If questions are coming, fine, but otherwise I'll take about 4 or 5 minutes, then we will get into question. I just wanted to really give another, make the same point from another angle. Namely, if you see, for instance, there have been major movements. Let us say the Shah of Iran was overthrown. But hardly anybody knew that Shah of Iran is going to be overthrown. But the question is, the point is that all our analysis, we are guided usually by a pre-selected, which has been already selected, set of tools with which we try to look at things. So when there is a dramatic change or a revolutionary change going to take place, these tools don't help us in understanding these changes. For instance, nobody could have ever predicted that Shah of Iran is going to be overthrown. That is a very important thing. In other words, what I would like to suggest in this context is, we should always be critical in our approach. Our tools do get jaded, do collect dust and rust, and they are always open for change. And as knowledge seekers, all of us should know that the tools that are given to us and the tools with which we analyze the society are the tools which might have gathered dust, and that which might have that doubt. You see, doubt is a very important aspect of knowing. If we are not without doubt, doubt gives the fire. Without that fire, your curiosity cannot be enkindled. And without curiosity, of course, there is no knowledge. So doubt forms a very important aspect. Everything should be taken with a pinch of salt, as they say. Otherwise, as I say, it's like a tip of the iceberg thing. If a ship sees the tip of the iceberg and concludes that it is the tip of the iceberg and runs over, then there is a shipwreck. 9/10 of the iceberg is not visible, but you cannot conclude that that is not there. What is visible is not always the truth. What is observable is not always the truth. There is quite a bit depth of other things which make the truth possible. And this is also an important tool to know that not everything visible is to be taken as truth. For instance, we have several instances, examples also in our own mythology, like 5 blind men, trying to find out, feel an elephant. So one who probably was feeling the leg thought that it is a pillar. That type of illusions are always there. These illusions are there in our own religion and elsewhere also, but they are true. Idea is that you should not confuse what you see with your naked eyes, what you observe with what you observe on the surface to be the truth, because there is definitely the truth has got a hidden structure, and that hidden structure is the challenge for the knower to know. If you know the hidden structure, then you know the complete truth. Otherwise, you are always with the partial truth, and the partial truths are always dangerous. So knowledge made up of such partial truths is likely to be much more dangerous. Okay, now we can.
Yes, I invite questions once more from the students, whoever might be there at the study centers. Meanwhile, we have about 10 minutes, 5 minutes now.
5 minutes more.
5 minutes more. The 5 minutes of discussion we can have on whatever Professor Naik has presented so far. Okay, let me take the last point first. The one about the observable truths. Now, there is a whole trend of understanding, Professor Naik, which though we haven't discussed in our course material, but maybe we will be subsequently be talking about, because this question of observable truth is a very important one. We can't leave it out I mean, in the current kind of a social scenario, the social scientific scenario, there's a lot of emphasis on this question of observable truth. There are basic philosophies and understandings. For example, the whole understanding which revolves around behaviorism, for example, talks about observable truths, the importance of observable truths and nothing else, which we need to contend with, in the sense that we come across this in our educational psychologies.
Yeah, that's right.
We come across this in our study of our societies.
You see, I got your point. I mean, you see, what happens is, it is not only empirical observation. What I am referring to, the empirical observations, but behaviorism or behavioralism also. Behaviorism in psychology, behavioralism in social sciences. You know, what they do is, they tend to reduce them into response patterns. I mean, for the analysis purpose. So what do they do is, then they start, you know, first of all, behavior is sort of atomized into certain responses. And these responses then, a sort of, with the help of, let us say, statistical analysis, they try to establish some bit of either correlationship, even some go to the extent of establishing causality, that is, X causing Y. But these give whole lot of funny findings. For instance, one gentleman started running a correlation and came to a conclusion that the tail wags the dog. Because that's possible. As many times the dog is shaking itself, the tail is also shaking. So that sort of relationship. Now, you see, what is happening, one of the major criticisms against behaviorism, same also, there is another catchy example from that behaviorism is that, you know, it was lightning, the crow sat on a branch and the branch fell down. So the crow is the cause of branches falling down. But actually the situation is a lightning which struck the branch. But if you are going to run this type of correlation exercise analysis, that is analyze your responses in this fashion. What fashion? This fashion is disembodied. It is taken out of the organic context. It is taken out of that particular original natural context and now prepared as a set of mechanical exercises, and a correlation is established between the two. So then they give rise to all funny. You see, this is the bane of many of the conclusions. This is the bane of many of these conclusions that have taken place, and many of the policy prescriptions which have also come up.
Actually, in fact, people like Herbert Marcuse and so on, they see some kind of behaviorist universes coming up, in which the alignment of technology and society basically link up in such a fashion that all kind of phenomena are studied in the behaviorist mode.
Yeah, that's right. But that is the major one. But the Marcuse must have been criticized for his technological determinism also, because Marcuse takes in a little bit of over-determined sense, in overly comprehensive influence, namely the technology is deciding and determining everything here. So I would put, if you ask me, behaviorism is one extreme, but Marcuse's determinism is another extreme. Probably truth lies somewhere in between, if you ask me.
I invite questions again. We are now in the process of winding up. If you have questions, you need to send it through a fax or through telephone numbers which are probably given to you by your study center coordinators. And okay, so we have had an interesting discussion. I mean, which has been a discussion which has been a curtain raiser to our foundation course in humanities and social sciences. I hope the various concerns which have been raised in these presentations have had some kind of relevance and some kind of a meaning for what you are going to undertake as a study of this course in the future date. Now we have run completely out of time, and I say here, bye-bye to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.